According to a global consortium of research scientists and operators I coordinate and collaborate with, trauma is just a severe or extreme undermining of one's confidence or ability to calculate the likelihood of occurrence in your non-conscious mind. I'll explain here in a moment in a lot more detail, but I want to sort of qualify the situation a little bit. It's a bizarre situation. Watch my other videos or contact me at confluenceinfinite.org for more information. These people who are giving me this information, I don't know if it's correct or not. This is in the idea category, so contact me if you have information in either regard, supporting or refuting what I'm saying here, because I am not a neurologist, but I'm getting it from people who claim to be and seem to be practitioners who must get results that save people's lives from a handful of people or dignitaries or fellow operators themselves, all the way up to potentially billions of people. They deal with global and local security experts. And these are real applications. So they can't just write a white paper or defend their thesis or just do their job, and that's it. Their job is they must get results. Part of what is important in that is if you're in charge of even local security, but all the way up to global security, you can't have your people you're protecting, if they're in charge of security especially, right, experiencing trauma, because that undermines their life. It throws you sideways and makes things really difficult. I've personally experienced massive, severe trauma. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert on trauma, but from an experience standpoint, I do know one version of it very, very well. It is something to contend with. It's serious. Watch my other videos for more information. I've got another video coming out that I'll explain it more. But the potential impact of what they do, if they get it wrong, is potentially billions of people's lives being in danger. Like serious, like dead or in trauma. So they've got to avoid trauma. And that's part of their job, themselves, their families, people they work with, and just people they're protecting, up to dignitaries. So doing that, you might imagine, kind of like I use this analogy sometimes, drill sergeant doesn't seem like he or she cares about you, but they care so much about defense or security, care so much they don't care. They're a bit callous. They're tough, really tough. And that's the situation with these people. They manipulate me and other people routinely. Like they lie. They don't care. Whatever they got to do to not be found out and get things done, they do it. So they'll manipulate. They'll embarrass people, me as well. So this could outright be a manipulation. I don't know if it's actually right. Just get the conversation going. They usually say, I'm pointed in the right direction. We'll see how that turns out. What they seem to be doing is they'll allow me, for example, waste my time, send me on a topic for months and waste my time, and only to find out that it was totally backwards or wrong or just nuanced different the direction it should be going. So they don't let me make catastrophic mistakes, but they'll let me make what they call smaller mistakes. You might see like spelling mistakes or, this video is not great production. They're like, well, as long as the video gets out. So they don't care. It's going to take longer to get this going, but hopefully that gives you some perspective. They protect me from catastrophic mistakes, but they don't care about any of that other stuff. As long as it's moving forward, pointing in the right direction, or going to get there eventually. In terms of getting this right, they say there's nefarious people involved who are interfering with the communications and my life and similar in sort of a secret way or clandestine or covert way. But I don't, I'm not paranoid or anything. I have no mental illness or anything. But that situation is very complicated because trauma, that's serious. That affects your mind. Qualify it that way. But they say there's nefarious people involved globally interfering. It seems that way too. It's super complicated. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I don't see any nefarious people, or not that nefarious anyway, affecting my life. So I just carry on the best I can. Okay. So let's get back to the trauma. Trauma is just severe or extreme undermining of one's confidence or ability to calculate the likelihood of occurrence in your non-conscious mind. If you consider that decision making occurs in a non-conscious way, more like animals, because we are animals, right? We're just a more sophisticated thinking animal. But they contend we have that animal, and there's some research out there, as far as I know, that I've seen, that we have this often called reptilian mind. They're going to call it an animal mind because they say it's a bit more sophisticated. It's a calculation machine, non-conscious calculation machine, and it calculates likelihood. I often say forecast. And it seems bolt on or in addition to the or overlapping dual purpose, I'm not sure, to the cognitive mind. So we have this animal mind, then we have our cognitive mind where we're thinking and contemplating and self-aware and that sort of thing. The non-conscious mind doesn't sort of know anything. It's just like a calculation machine, like a computer kind of, but not really. And sometimes the cognitive mind never even knows. So the mind that you're self-aware with, part of your brain, we contend, that doesn't even know that there is even a problem. It just keeps on figuring. You keep thinking in one direction and it doesn't even know what's going on, or that the non-cognitive mind even exists. Like, I'm trying to introduce it sort of in a more elaborate way than it's been described before, you know. But most people who study the brain are sort of just armchair wizard on neurology, know that the non-conscious mind, not non-cognitive, I don't know why, but they say non-conscious. So the one you're not aware of is the mind I'm mostly referring to here. Most people know that it controls heartbeat. I'm obviously not a neurologist. It controls your heartbeat and other functions, basic functions in your body. Well, I don't know if it's the same one or a different one or something, but they describe something that's gradients of that affects that stuff all the way up to your brain. Non-consciously affects your heartbeat and other bodily functions that are regular and non-consciously controlled. It seems more like neurological response or triggers or something like that, right? So all the way up to high-level decision-making, we'll call it that, or calculation of likelihood of occurrence. And it ties back to the trauma, the severe undermining of one's confidence. We're going to call that confidence the calculation mind. So this non-conscious mind controls the heartbeat, let's say, and all the way up to, I don't know if that's a different part or what, but all the way up to calculating whether you should cross a bridge, right? But it's your non-conscious mind. And that doesn't need to manifest into a feeling. I don't know why, or emotion. So most people say, oh, your gut feel, you just get this, scary feeling or whatever when you're, say, crossing a bridge or something, or on the edge of a cliff, or you see a scary bug or insect or a animal or something. You get this feeling, but that doesn't have to happen. You don't have to have that trigger that forms an emotion or feeling. And they want me to describe it as these triggers that don't produce any emotion whatsoever, but produce a result. And it seems nonsensical or weird, but evolved for some reason. Either it was just a kind of a evolutionary snafu, if you will, or hangover from some situation that no longer happens and we will never know or might not know for a while, or it just happened to come along with the way we live, or it was for good reason. For example, when I say a number or a color, you can look this up online, it associates people's thoughts or inclination to respond to a number or a color. So if I say orange, you're more likely to say 8 or 10. I can't remember what, you can look up the actual answer. I don't know. I don't want to misinform you. And if you say a number, you often will associate different things like colors. I think 8 or 10 produces orange or something like that. I haven't looked it up in a long time. So for no good seeming reason, but there's some evolutionary reason or some neurological reason that that occurs. And there's no feeling associated with that. And it's likelihood of occurrence, or likelihood not always. It's not a, if I say 8, you're not always going to think orange, if that's true. You're not, and if I say orange, you're not always going to think 8, for example. So it's not 100%, but it's an occurrence that is calculated or present. And another one they wanted me to bring up was the QWERTY keyboard. They had me listen to an NPR, National Public Radio show. They were talking about the standard American style, I don't know what it is, keyboard. When it was introduced, people started naming their children differently. With the first letter of the name of their children, I think it was L more or something. We started changing how we named our children. And there was no emotion. People didn't even know that, was aware of that. So that sort of tells you that something's going on there. It's not just this reptilian trigger. There's something reasoning, if you will, behind the scenes, behind the curtain, if you will, that of your brain, non-conscious is what we say. And oftentimes told that if you bring this up in this way, people say that the fact that infants can experience trauma without any sort of background or history, right? There's no reason to have trauma. So then why do infants experience trauma? And apparently they do. It's set up like the QWERTY keyboard affected our brains right at birth. So birth canal, in the womb, dropping into the doctor's or somebody's hands, pool of water on the ground. Those, depending on how you give birth, right? Don't drop a baby on the ground, though, newborn. Anyway, it's set up like that. And there's a domino effect, I'm told, after, like when the baby sees the first light, that triggers something in the brain, that sets up something else, like, I say a color, and you get a number and a color or something like that. If I say it, and it produces, or the QWERTY keyboard, your name, the name of your child, that you name your children. So that change didn't have any emotion with it. It's kind of nonsensical, or it doesn't have to have any reason or rhyme to it. And that's how the baby's sort of calculation machine is set up. So it's not pre-set up, but it's pre-set up with nonsensical things right away so that the baby can, suckle a bosom, expect a caregiver to, in their non-conscious, if you want to call it, brain. And it might be a little different for an infant, I don't know. But that sort of sets it up. And that's why they say infants can experience trauma. So there's no linchpin, if you want, that negates what I'm saying in that respect. These people, national security, global security, local security, law enforcement, military people, is what they seem like to me. They did not say they were those people. They've alluded to that, though. Always infuse sex. In just about every one of my videos, well, not everyone, but many of the videos, they would do it even more if I would allow them. So it's a little embarrassing. And remember, as I mentioned, they do not care if I'm embarrassed. It's about getting things done best they can. And definitely not perfect, right? So, for example, they wanted me to bring up sucking a lollipop. Why are you doing that? Right? Was there any emotion involved with that? Or maybe you're satisfying some sort of emotion, right? And there's a sexual innuendo in there. I'll let your mind drift if you want. I try to be a bit more professional than that, but whatever. It's not healthy, right? When you suck a lollipop, it's full of sugar and it's got additives, it's got food coloring in it usually, and those sort of things. So then why do you do it? Something in your non-conscious mind is being triggered, right? In your palate. We wanted fruits and vegetables, or we needed to eat fruits and vegetables, especially green ones, which are a bit sweeter, right? And that gave us nutrition. So that could very well be why you like sweet stuff. Maybe some honey in there or something as well. I don't know. And that increased perhaps our food intake that had nutrition that was good for us, because those things are sweeter, right? But then you introduce, man-made so-called innovation and sugar that's refined and all this syrups and food colorings and stuff. And then it starts to be really bad for you, not good. But then why a lollipop? Why a sucker? Why not just a gumball, right? So what's your preference there and why, right? So there's odd things going on there, which has some sexual references or connection. And we shouldn't be having suckers and lollipops, right? They're full of dyes that are not good and known to be less than healthy est. And that's what I'm told to, and seems best is to talk about is what is healthy est. I don't want to get in trouble by the Jessica Nurix. She's somebody to contend with. But you shouldn't be eating lollipops that have tons of sugar or syrup in them, corn syrup and dyes and additives, not because they'll kill you if you have a little bit, but they're killing you a little bit if you have some, or they're not healthy est. So don't do it. Don't have that. And instead have fruits and vegetables, right? So then that ties in stuff these people want me to put in there, and also links in what I'm talking about. There's neurological and some, maybe that's their emotions involved in that too. So let's get more directly back to the trauma. You can think of your confidence or that non-conscious calculating machine, calculating likelihood of occurrence, as a block, a pyramid of blocks. And if you pull out a block at the bottom of the pyramid, the side might slough off or fall down, but not all the blocks, or the whole thing can fall down, or most of it. So there's usually a few blocks at least there, and that's how you still function, or it's compartmentalized often trauma when your confidence is undermined. So it could be just in relationships, it could be military context, or just being yelled and screamed at as a kid, and that sort of thing. So it's not all or nothing with your confidence being undermined or that non-calculation machine. Those are one and the same. And I'm told also to interject here that the brain has physical responses, and those physical responses somehow negate, people presume or assume or postulate that they refute or argue against what I'm saying. And they're saying that the physical responses in the brain, size change of different parts of your brain when you're going through trauma, are responses to either the trauma or consequences of that trauma. Maybe you starved yourself because you were going through trauma and just didn't eat, and part of the brain, or I don't know, ate something different or drank different or took some drugs or something like that, because a lot of trauma victims do. I didn't. And that affects your brain. So it's a response to trauma and other things that happen with trauma is their explanation for why the brain changes shape of parts of I don't think the whole brain changes shape, but parts of in size, it shrinks or expands or something like that. So that, for me, my brain goes right to my brain. I don't know, my cognitive brain, maybe aided by my non-conscious brain. I think they work side by side in parallel, and maybe sometimes in conflict. I don't know. The modern brain is not that old. So it's really, really new in terms of evolutionary time. So there's probably still some figuring out there, and we should definitely be trying to go evolve intentionally, get the human brain working better, and by picking people who have better brains that work better, and verify that that's actually the case without guessing. But anyway, whenever I have that discussion, I think of, well, gosh, if trauma is just extreme erosion or detriment or undermining of one's confidence, or that calculation machine of likelihood that is non-conscious, then can't we just build people's confidence and repair or fix people's brains or the trauma situation? The answer is I don't know, and these people who are helping me with this, who gave me this idea and told me to make this video, who deal with global security and care so much they are so insensitive or seem like they don't care, won't tell me because they don't want me to go in that direction. And if you think about it, there's actually a much, much better direction to go. Prevent trauma altogether. Like, why fix it? let's avoid it altogether. Not avoid it by escaping, but avoid going through trauma. So that's where they camp out. That's where they live. They don't want the dignitaries they protect. They don't want the people they protect, populations, and their coworkers to go through trauma because it wrecks your life. It really hampers their operation and life in general, and their families as well. So they say prevent it. And here's how you prevent it. Here's how they say, and it seems to me as well through, just sort of a non-expert's thinking about it. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not a genius. They say you can prevent trauma by not misaligning that non-conscious calculating machine of likelihood away from reality. If you keep your life focused on the reality of life, real things, you won't have trauma. You won't experience it. It won't come up in society near as much. And that's the problem. You prevent it that way. So that's part of why these people are so harsh seeming or callous seeming or tough. For example, if you believe in assumed magic like God, Jesus, magical Buddha, and things that are not actually real, magical Zen states of meditation, astrology, palm reading, all that stuff, if you truly believe in that or depend on that or focus on that at all, those things aren't real. I mean, you can pretend they're real, but they're not actually real. You cannot verify them. And if you can't verify it, it's usually not real. And we've been trying to verify those things for thousands of years now, and not one iota of even statistically significant data exists that says it's real, any of it. If you believe anything supernatural, your perspective is not aligned with reality. It's misaligned. Another one is don't shield people from, even youngsters, in the right way, right? We don't want to cause them trauma, but don't shield them from the gross reality that is human behavior right now. It didn't always used to be this way, and I talk about that in other videos. And we're going to bring that back in a modernizable way. You don't have to modernize it, but we want people to live the way people used to live about 2,000 to 10,000 years ago. That was apparently harmonious until crazy people destroyed it, who believed in what? Assumed magic, like God, Crusaders, and other people. Genghis Khan, Nile and 9 hostages. The most genetically prolific people in the world. Now, that is not working. If mass murders and warlords are the most prolific in the human genome, it should be the opposite, right? The most giving, wonderful people. Where's Gandhi? Mahatma Gandhi, right? I don't know. He's the only one I could think of. But anyway, preferably somebody who didn't believe in magic. I don't know his history. But if you shield people from the gross, disgusting, and I'm not talking bodily fluid disgusting, I'm talking about murdering, raping, violence that's needless, that occurs in the world, and just malignant thinking that screws up people's lives, puts them in trauma, that misaligns your perspective so it's not aligned with the reality. That's how they say you prevent it. Just 2 ways. And if you want more information on that, I use different terminology that works much better in these other videos. But if you watch our earlier videos that has a CF Bear model in the name, CF Bear model, and distilling the context and kaleidoscope, watch those videos. There's 2 of them there. It's a 2-part video. First one's 4 hours long, and the second part I think is at least a couple hours long. I'm going to take you in a different direction because why? We're not shielding you from the gross reality or the astonishing reality. And if you think I'm hyping for the internet, talk to anybody who knew me before 2018, before all this happened. Let's say this dude's about as level-headed as it gets, most reasonable dude you could talk to. Well, one of them anyway. I just don't get into conspiracies. I just don't do that. I'm an objective-minded person who has emotions and feelings. So, healthy. The results of having your perspective out of line with reality, you're not realizing or experiencing and knowledgeable and aware of the gross reality that is the human plight right now, which can be despicable, then oftentimes you're going through some social paranoia, some degree of it, a little bit to a lot. Like if your spouse cheats on you, or a friend betrays you, you get a little bit of edgy. You start doing things a little different. Well, we're going to give a little different explanation for that. We think you're getting to the reality. We don't think you're paranoid, usually. Let's do two very dramatic examples. And they say this stuff happens all the time. These are people who watch people for a living from a security standpoint, global and local security. So they really see what goes on. They can't even investigate it all because they got to deal with the ones that are the worst. So one situation, let's say that you're a woman and say an average life and you just dote on your grandpa. He's the most wonderful person. You look up to him. He's your model for the man in your life, that as a kid or as an adult, and he's just a wonderful person, and you think he's sort of the model man. But then he abducts you and puts you in the basement for 10 years, molests you for a decade, and then you escape. Your perspective was out of line with reality because you thought that all men were like your grandpa, or much more like your grandpa, and your grandpa would never do this, right? So it seems extreme, but they said that's necessary. If you want a harmonious world, which is our goal, if you want to prevent trauma, and preventing trauma is part of creating harmony in the world, or creating trauma in the right people and not in other people, you have to think differently. And we're trying to get you to do that. Show you how to do that and how that's done, and then show an example of it. So if you're a guy, let's say you have a bunch of kids, having your own genetic kids is super important to you. Say after 10 years, you find out that those kids, all of them, were not yours. They were all fathered by men that you thought were friends of yours, your best friend from childhood, your coworker, the friends you met in college, the people who literally stood in your wedding, right, as your groomsmen and your best man and that sort of thing. Those people had your children. Now imagine that, what happened. You fathered no children. You're now going extinct. Your genes will not pass on. That stuff really happens. And I've got some experience with that. I'm going to make a video here soon that details some of that, the stuff I can announce. So those would create social trauma, be a bit edgy after that, right? So you'd be severely socially paranoid, at least part of how you see the world, because you trusted them, those people. But now you don't know what to think or believe, right? Believe. That's key. So you're not sure what to do. And so now you have a more difficult time calculating the likelihood of meeting or having children with, or whatever, just calculating the likelihood that somebody you interact with that is of the opposite sex is going to be a wonderful person or not, right? So then it's super edgy. It becomes socially weird or awkward and emotionally charged sometimes and really difficult to navigate. But what really occurred there? I hinted at it there a little bit. And before I get into that, just two sort of qualifying statements. Remember, we're trying to prevent being susceptible to, exposed to, and open to things and people that create trauma. So that's our goal with this video, is to help people understand what causes trauma and prevent that. Prevent people who are wonderful experiencing trauma, and help people stay out of trauma so there's no trouble in their life, and we can operate much better without extreme emotional feelings that are unnecessary. Remember, these are practitioners of global security. They can't have the people they're protecting experience trauma. Their operators, their families, the dignitaries, they cannot. So they are experts at dealing with situations that would otherwise cause trauma and preventing situations cause trauma. So to me, it seems like a pretty darn good source, perhaps the best source in the world. And they watch human behavior when people don't realize they're watching human behavior, so they get a very objective look at what the world is really like, not what we assume it's like, not the social norm. So what really occurred when we had our misalignment of our perspective relative to the gross reality that your grandfather could abduct you and sexually rape you, right? That your spouse could have children with all sorts of other people who are your closest confidants in life, who supported you through your whole life, right? And the woman that you vetted for a number of years before you had children, yeah, that stuff happens. So what really occurred is you assumed, that's a key word, assumed, because you live in a cult of assumption that assumes dangerously, right? Trauma is super dangerous. People fall into traumatic experiences and it ruins their lives. They just start not caring or other things and acting paranoid and get shunned by the world and other things. And I've experienced some of that. Some of them go into drug addiction and alcoholism and stuff, and it just ruins their lives and their families' lives. They do erratic things. I'll go through mine, but I didn't touch any drugs or anything like that. But it's challenging situation. You're in a cult of assumption. We assume dangerously way too much. But when you assume, it cognitively gives you a reason to do what only feels good or makes you feel better, or at least you think it will. But in the end, it doesn't. Instead of doing what is truly comprehensively healthiest, living in line, and we said this is how we say it, living in line with your biology with nothing assumed for optimal health. That isn't assumed to be perfect, because assumption makes an ass out of you and me, right? That works. Don't assume. Don't believe in God. Don't believe the terrible, gross things are not going to happen to your children, family, friends, and so on, coworkers. Expose them to the gross reality. Driver's ed, when you learn to drive, in America at least, they often make you watch a disgusting movie. At least they used to. That's a blood and guts movie, just gory. Why? Because you're driving a missile, right? It can be anyway. When you're driving a car or a motorcycle or a truck, right? It's an object that can destroy people's lives and your lives. So it's real. So what are they doing there? They're aligning your perspective with the reality, the gross reality of what could occur, how dangerous driving a vehicle really is. So we say live in line with your biology with nothing assumed for optimal health that isn't assumed to be perfect. And so the sort of the delivery on that is practical and you can sort of look at is these research scientists and operators who are concerned with global security and local security and your health and not experiencing trauma, they verify everything. Everything they can verify, they verify it. And they say they verify everything. They don't assume anything, and they demand transparency. If you aren't transparent, they don't want to deal with you. You're on the outside. You aren't part of our club, our security operation or whatever. And that's how it works. That's how you do it. That's part of how you make the world harmonious too. And we'll get into that. I get into that in other videos. So let me know what you think. I want both expert and regular people and people who experience trauma. I got some other videos that discuss my personal plight and desire to connect with people who've experienced severe, massive trauma. I'm not a, you know, and just be friends and connect and see where that friendship goes. I'm not a therapist. I'm not certified, licensed in anything neurology, anything. I'm a stock guy. I'm an analyst, capital markets analyst guy, portfolio, buy side investments guy. So qualify all that. Super weird video, I know, but you kind of got to watch all the videos or contact me. You don't got to watch them all. I'm not here to make a YouTube channel. I'm here to do what causes truly verifiably healthy human focused people to outperform societally and biologically, so evolutionarily, because how else do you make the world more harmonious? So we can achieve a real global harmony that isn't perfect for all someday. Go to our website, confluenceinfinite.org, and this is part of Confluence Infinite International, which is part of an effort or strategy called PFACS. PFACTS, all caps. It is a people-focused, adaptive, truly comprehensive tactical strategy for global harmony for all. That isn't assumed to be perfect. Because why? That would misalign your perspective with reality. Perfection doesn't actually exist. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to reach out, comment, and share this video.